It's
Craig.
Craig. What's up, boys? Back again. Rules, Jules, D&D Schools. We're sticking with that name, by the way.
okay.
I've rolled back. I've rolled back on my opinion, and here's why. I remembered, wait a minute. There's a pretty big YouTuber with D&D in their name, and they don't give no fucks about that guy.
Yeah.
And I know they know about it.
Okay.
So, yeah, remember what I said last week? Scrap that for a couple of reasons. One, I don't need to worry about it. And two, I went to sit down to redo all of our artwork and everything, and I was like,
That's the big reason right there.
I was like, man,
told
rules
about this whole thing you came up with.
I was like,
I don't really want to do this.
I was like,
Let me think
rules,
of a way
jewels,
to
and
convince them not to do it.
rules, jewels, and tabletop schools. That just doesn't fit on there as nice. I really like that RJ D&D logo that I made for the profile and everything too. I was like, that's good. I don't want that to be RJ TTRPG. It just looks better. Sorry, everyone. False alarm. We're saying as rules, jewels, and D&D schools.
Rules, jewels, and D&D schools.
So, boys, shall we talk about today's subject?
What are we talking about today?
Hey, what are we talking about today?
Man,
What are we going to do tonight, Brian?
Fucking
do
every night. I haven't seen that show in so long. I think they made a new version of that show. We're tangent. We're on a tangent already.
I think you just need to let it happen.
We're on a tangent already. Well, listen, you want to talk about world building in the context of Pinky and the Brain?
I don't know enough about Pinky and the Brain to do that.
Listen, the only thing
I
that
don't even
matters.
know what Pinky and the Brain is.
Oh, that makes me sad.
Pinky and the Brain. Pinky and the Brain. They're like mice, and they live in the Universal Studios backlot. That's what it is.
They were lab rats, and Brain is, because he was a lab rat, was a genius, and Pinky's an idiot. But
yeah.
So every night they try to take over the world, and Pinky always asks, "What are we going to do tonight, Brain?" We do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
Classic. That and Animaniacs. That was the one that ran with it. It was in that show, right?
Yeah, it was a short in Animaniacs.
Yeah. Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain. What else was it? There was more than just those two, right?
Slappy Squirrel.
I don't remember that one at all.
They had
must not have been very memorable.
They had a Who's on First bit, but I think it was like Woodstock, and Who was the band Who.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was good. Slappy Squirrel, she was like an angry old lady. Older lady, but she was a squirrel.
I feel like I don't remember that one at all. And I definitely watched Pinky and the Brain.
There was I think it was Yakko.
Okay. Yep.
Yakko, Wacko, and Dot were the three.
Yeah, I remember Slappy Squirrel. She had her own show. I thought she was just Slappy and Skippy.
Yeah. I think those two. I think that Pinky and the Brain was the only thing to come out of Animaniacs. I could be wrong. Anyway, world building. World building.
In Pinky and the Brain, it's two mice living on a backlot in Universal Studios. It's an alternate version of our own reality. There you go. Built the whole world. It's a world where there's a mouse that's trying to take over the world, but it's really bad at it.
He's actually quite good at it. It's just very hard to do.
It's just very hard to take over the whole world, dude. All right. What do we want? What's the first world building?
Where do you want to take this? Because that's a broad topic. What do you want to?
That is a broad topic. Let's talk about, like, if you're setting up a world, what do you think are the important things to establish? Because I feel like if I was writing a book, I would build a world in a completely different way than if I was doing D&D, because I have to allow a little bit of room for the players to have a little bit of say in what's going to happen. How much is too much information? Maybe, like, how much is too little information on the world? Can you get away with nothing? How much do you think is an appropriate amount to set out before the game begins? Things like that, you know?
Well, I've done this twice, essentially.
Yeah.
Our first campaign was my first really my first foray into D&D at all.
Yeah.
And everything I knew about any kind of world building was all from watching Critical Role. So I was like, I can do this. Let's go. And my world was far too small. You guys completely traversed it within that campaign. And there was really nothing left to. I mean, I could have made some like smaller towns and stuff, but you had been through the entire world essentially.
I don't know that that's necessarily a problem though, because that makes the world like actually traversable as opposed to like, oh, you want to go all the way up to the north? Well, that's going to take you 10 sessions. You know what I mean?
What are like some top things when you're going into world building? Like, what is like a top 5 list of like, gotta have this, gotta have this, gotta have this, gotta have this. This is where your starting stones are.
Oh, man, for D&D, like a fantasy setting.
Yeah, you tell me, and I'll tell you what I did.
Oh man, oh my god.
I think you like if you're starting with world building, you got to start with world superpowers. Like,
I'd start with
gotta be big countries.
Yeah.
That have different cultures, different.
Yeah, I'd want to have major superpower to the world. I'd want to have kind of a map or the geography of where I was going to go. Like climate of places. I feel like that one's overlooked a lot because I always am asking. Like I'm playing that Storm Druid. And I'm like, any storms going on? Everywhere we are is temperate. Just like no storms here. It's just nice clear blue day every day.
Well, I think we had some rain earlier, but I think he's like turned off the rain because I can hide in it.
We can have a light rain for Christ's sakes. How about a thunderstorm here and
light rain?
We're in dang fields and hills and there's no weather. But I mean, it's not just his campaign. It's like every campaign. Everyone, I feel like weather is one of those things that everyone thinks about in the beginning and then it just falls off.
But weather. You never ask about it in my campaign. I have zones, and then that calendar. I've talked about the calendar thing that I use before. I push the zone, and it tells me what the weather is that day.
Well, damn, son. It's just in that campaign, the weather doesn't affect how my character plays.
Uh-huh. So don't tell me it's in all your campaigns. I have weather, nobody cares, and that's fine because it's not really important.
I'm going to be asking about the weather.
If it were to be important, I have information.
I'm going to ask about the weather every session now. What's the weather like, dude?
$100 says he doesn't remember that.
There a storm coming in? Oh, fuck you. Watch this. Wait.
He's going to write it down. Look out.
Yeah. Remind me Monday at 9 p.m. to ask how the weather is.
Okay.
Great.
I added it.
Okay. I added it.
Ask how the weather is. 3/20/23, 9 p.m.
All right. Now you'll remember. And
I'll remember.
Let me look, and I'll tell you it's
I'll tell you exactly what the weather's like, my guy. I think like the history of a world can matter quite a bit depending on the kind of campaign you're running. Like if the world is the way it is right now when we're starting, was it always that way? Has it changed over time? Does that matter to the story?
In that aspect, you definitely have to have some sort of history, at least up to some point of like. There was a cataclysm and we don't know what happened before that, but we know everything that happened after, and that's what built these countries and these blah blah blahs and these areas.
Of course, the other way to do it is like seat of your pants world building, right? You are in a town and the world gets created as you guys move around. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You don't tell anybody anything unless it's something like
harder for me to do for sure.
Yeah, I think I don't see how that works because your characters just like, oh, where are we? You know,
I just have
we don't know anything about anything. We don't know.
I mean, like realistically, how many campaigns have you played where the DM goes, and here's some cities, and you're like, I don't know, you don't remember any of them at the start of the first session. You could totally not know that stuff. Easy. You're from a foreign land and you've just showed up here. What foreign? And as long as, whatever, you're in this new zone, everything's good.
Oh no, it makes it hard if you're going. People go, where are you from? And you go, I'm from a foreign land.
Everyone in your group could be from that foreign land, dude.
What's the
foreign
land called?
Just has the name of one city, and that's all you need.
Foreign land.
It's for Foreign Shire.
Oranshire. Yeah, that's the perfect name. It can be bare minimum or it can be way over the top.
Yeah, so one of the things when I started world building was I had to make sure I didn't get too into it. So, and I've
Don't
heard
get stuck. Yeah.
I've heard Matt Mercer talk a little bit about this as well. So like when I started making the world that we're doing now,
Yeah.
I wanted to start off with like a Mediterranean environment. So I went to, I think it was, I don't remember what map generator I used.
Yeah.
But I
One of
kept
the
making
many.
world, making them over and over again until I got something with 2 continents that I liked. And one of them had like a sea in the middle of it. I was like, cool, I'll go with that one. So that's the Ledric Sea. And then I just built the towns around it to sort of synergize off of each other and have like established trade routes and stuff. And then I was like, I kept getting deeper and deeper into it. And the thing that I had to avoid was like, at some point, I'm going to have to figure out like how the taxation and tariffs work on trading. And that's too far.
That's too far. That's a little too much world building.
Yeah.
Like, how often are your players going to be like, so I brought gold over from the city next to us. What's the exchange rate, you think?
Well, it's about to, like, I thought about those things, and I think it's about to matter based on what you guys plan on doing with your boat. So,
nah. Here's how you handle that kind of thing. Gold is worth the same amount no matter where you are.
well, yeah. But just
Universal
like how
currency.
much you can make off of it. I'm not going to make a whole other rule set for it, but I've thought about it a little bit. So it's nice to have on the
Back thing.
burner.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I started, so I did the first campaign world, and I was like, I could like do lots of stuff with this. And then we got to the end of it, and I was like, they kind of already explored everything that I want, that I'm like excited about. And so I was like, okay, I know what I'm gonna do. And I made Farron, and I was like, we're only gonna really do one continent. But what I did a little bit of was threw in some of the other town names from other places, so you guys can have them in your brain. So if I mention them, you can be like, that sounds familiar. And part of that was done with the handball tournament.
So like the handball, that's like a cultural thing. How much of the culture of the world do you think you set up before we started?
A fair amount, but I didn't want to go too deep into it to leave room for if something cool came up, I can be like, oh yeah, these people over here love that.
They like waffles, not pancakes.
You ever think about like people from this part of the country are gonna talk like this, and people from this part of the world are gonna talk like this?
I thought about that.
Or is that just kind of like
that's a little,
you visit that town, okay, these people are gonna sound like this.
I did think about that, and I was like, that's too hard.
That's too hard. That's too much.
Yeah, it's a lot to keep track of, and then having to keep track of like regional accents was a bit too much for me. So I was like, that would be cool, but I'm gonna mess it up, so I'm not gonna worry about it.
Listen, it's a fantasy world. Everyone can have homogenized accents, and then some characters can just have their own special little thing going on.
Yeah,
they're from a place you'll never see.
Yeah, but if I were capable of doing that, I wanted to do that. I just didn't think I could do it well enough to justify the amount of work that I would have to put into it.
All like, regional accent stuff.
Yeah,
that would be insane. That would be absolutely friggin' wild, dude.
Yeah, because then you get into the sort of like, if you are talking to like an NPC, like a sort of main NPC in a certain region, and then you go and talk to 3 NPCs that you guys were like, I want to find a person who knows about fill in the blank, and I have to make those NPCs up on the spot. They're going to have the exact same voice if they have the same accent, and I haven't been able to work on it. So I didn't want to do that either. So sometimes that happens anyway. But
so what about things like this has become interview you about your campaign, World Builder. You're the only one running a campaign right now. What? So like, how much have you made up on the spot as far as like when Michael got arrested? That prison system, he definitely should have been elbow-noed. Because like in my mind, we started the campaign. And you're like the arcane. I've already lost
Aegis.
The Aegis is like, they're strict, and shit's strict when you're in cities. He straight up tries to murder a guy in the middle of the city, and they're like, You better stop
Well,
that.
that was, I mean, he didn't use any magic to do it, right? So the Aegis, it wasn't their jurisdiction. They talked to the other people in the party about using magic, but there was no murder, right? First off, there was no murder. The guy lived and was convinced not to press charges, right?
Oh yeah, I guess
the beefiest NPC we've ever met.
he was. Yeah, that random stranger had like 200 HP.
I just pulled a stat block for a wizard, and it happened to have like 80 something HP, and you guys didn't get him, and I was like, yeah, that's good.
Man, I felt like there was so much damage being dealt out.
Yeah, there was. And I was like, why are you trying to? Oh, I mean, I knew why Michael was trying to kill him, but I thought you guys would like try to pull him back. And you did for like a second. And then you're like, whatever, let's just kill this guy. I was like, whoa.
No, more like, whatever. I don't want to be involved in this. I don't know if I'm going to get like capital punished.
Yeah. So, I mean,
who's walking out from behind the gate with a gun to shoot me in the back of the head? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know how this world works exactly.
Yeah, him living made it a lot easier on me. If he had died and I didn't have like some cleric come in and save his life or something, that could have been a lot more sticky. I would have had to figure, because like prison system is easy enough. Like most of them were pretty similar. And then he lived, so I was like, okay, you getting a second chance here because of some connections that are made from your daughter. But yeah, that was made up on the fly. I didn't have a set thing for that.
You seem to have gotten into the world building part of it more than I thought you had. What about like regional like clothing styles, cultural differences between regions? Do you think about that? Not just not accents, but like style of the buildings and things like that.
I had thought about that. If you'll notice all the different cities on the Ledric Sea there.
Yeah.
All the dock regions of those are painted different colors. I've mentioned it a couple times. Each city has a different color associated with it for like the port part of the town, the dock part of the town.
We need to start using those AI tools to get some like better pictures of these things. When they're on Tailspire, it's like, okay, it's a dock.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm not going to go out and like Tailspire and build out every one of the cities. That would be ridiculous.
That would be amazing.
But yeah, I thought about the architecture styles a little bit. Like Bloomshire is much more. I guess you guys, most of you haven't been there yet, but it is more. Well, it's the big like gnome engineering capital of the Ledric Sea area. So it's got the lock is over there, which is a newer ish thing, and its architecture sort of resembles more shorter ceilings because there's more gnomes that live there, and a lot more mechanical type stuff. Whereas I envision Nethalon to be more sort of utilitarian and plain looking, and Takria to look more sort of like academic.
Are you thinking like Tudor style, like what you think of when you think of classic British architecture
for Nethalon?
Yeah,
like
the wood beams with the white plaster walls. You know what I'm saying?
I think of Nethalon as, I mean, it's not obviously all this, but I think of Nethalon more of as like a suburb. Like all the houses look the same and boring, and Takria to be more sort of like varied architecture with the great library there, the library of Takria.
I just come at like without artwork, I feel like everyone's interpretation of this is gotta be completely different. It
absolutely is. And if anyone asks, I'll tell them the way I envision it. But really, there's, I mean, as far as architecture and stuff goes, there can be pockets of whatever. So you can be like, I want to, you can, a player can make up something they see, and it's, as long as it's not everywhere, I'm okay with that. I'm like, yeah, there's a spot where that is happening. But on the for the most part, you notice this. But yeah, I thought about all those things, but it's tough to know like how much to dive into that. I don't want to like give an hour-long description of a city that you guys are getting to, because I know that after about 2 minutes of a description, most people stop listening, and because they're thinking about one thing I said at the beginning of it.
I like
so
those
I
kind
try
of
not to do
descriptions,
that.
but it feels like no one else does. I want to know what a place feels like, what it's like to be there. Because without an explanation, I'm just like, oh, this is just another like fantasy town, bog standard fantasy town. I just assume every place is fantasy town. It's
I try to
Tudor style buildings. It's your classical inns, your all that kind of stuff. Like the inns in Tailspire, those white with the boards, that like Tudor style is what I just expect everything to look like.
Yeah, most of the smaller towns have very similar architecture as far as what I envision, just because they have fewer resources and kind of have to make do with the wood that's around, and mostly it's going to be the same. But yeah, the bigger cities, I thought about it, but it just hasn't really come up, I guess. I've described it a little bit, especially in like the different colors of the dock districts of each one, but
got to use that Midjourney, dude. We got to get on that Midjourney AI bot. I've got it here in the Discord. You should generate some images. It's getting better.
So I thought about the Ledric Sea, and I was like, okay, if there are all these trade things, this is like medieval-ish time, and pirates are a thing. There's going to be pirates, and then I was like, okay, they will have moved around different locations because the lock was made, which made trade go through a different route.
Yeah.
Because before, so before the lock was made, all the trade had to come from basically the west side of Ortith, the continent.
Yeah.
So there's two continents, Ortith, and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head. I can look it up, but there's we'll call Ortith, there's not really east and west because it's a circle, but we'll call Ortith the eastern continent and the other one the western continent. So eastern continent, Ortith, all the trade from the other continent came from the west and came in through that little opening into the Ledric Sea. And then Bloomshire made the lock, and it was shorter to go around the other way. So all the trade diverted from coming from the west to coming from the east. And like pirate coves and stuff, the ones towards the west sort of got abandoned. So I have those things, like, should it ever come up, I doubt that it will, because there's no reason for it to, but there are abandoned pirate coves on the western side of Ortith that they just left because there were no more trade routes coming that way.
Yeah, you definitely put more thought into this than I've ever put into world building. I'm definitely like a seat of my pants kind of guy. Like I get the framework. Like I have a frame of a building, and the building gets built as the players move around. I have like the big picture stuff instead of the really tight nuance. You know what I mean?
I started with the broad strokes, and as I was building it, I was like, well, why would this be here? And I had to look at the map, like geography, be like, well, okay, there's a river, so there's resources. And then I was like, well, if those things shift, what would happen to all the stuff over here? And I went through it and just ran variables and decided on some things. So
how'd you decide on what races and everything to allow?
The races, I mean, almost any of the races are allowable, but there are some that are far more rare, because I didn't want to say no to a bunch of different races outside of the flying ones, because it just makes things so much harder to balance.
No bird people.
Yeah, and maybe later we find some bird people out on an island somewhere, right? But for
Darwin's bird people.
yeah. But it's like for the main continents that you guys are going to be on, it can be almost any race. But if you're like of one of the weird, like a hobgoblin or something, there's going to be a lot fewer of those walking around.
A Thri-kreen.
Yeah, you guys passed some Thri-kreen in the jungle. But in my campaign, they have not moved into any kind of cities at all.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Whenever you're going to world build, are you looking at regional monsters as well, other than just races? And
to a certain degree, yes. Whenever you guys went through the jungle, I was like, okay, what would be here? Because I know what sort of environment it's going to be, but I also don't want to if there's something like a fun monster stat block, I don't want to limit myself to not having that because it's not in the right environment. So I will look at that and say, okay, well, this could be here. And if it's something super weird, then I'll be like, okay, it's not going to be there, but maybe I use that stat block and just reskin it. So I do put some thought into that. Yeah, for instance, you guys fought way different stuff when you were going up the mountain than what you fought in the jungle.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
And you saw a couple things. Yeah.
Yeah, besides just goblins. And goblins are everywhere.
That can move. Yeah, goblins and like there's even goblins are kind of like elves, right? Oh, it's a sea goblin.
A sea goblin. That's a mountain goblin over there.
But yeah, you guys fought like basically a mountain kobold, or you met a mountain kobold when you went up the mountain. But so kobolds are kind of everywhere, depending on they're different colors and stuff and have different adaptations. And for the most part, the major, like the big races, most of the ones in the player's handbook,
the main ones,
they have sort of bigger stations,
the Tolkien races,
basically. Like for the most part, the humans and gnomes are the ones that are mainly take up Ortith, and humans mostly in the northern part, and the gnomes in the southern part.
Yeah.
And then of course there's lots of in between, but for the majority, they are mostly humans top, mostly gnomes bottom. And then the other continent is mostly elves and dwarves. So again, you're going to see more mixing, but they're primarily elves and dwarves on the other continent. But yeah, when I went into world build, clever world building is really fun for me, and I don't do it as well as the things that I watched that I'm like, oh, that was cool. But I still enjoy it.
Sometimes it's about like the world building becomes part, like in the way that I like to do it, which is a little more flighty. That gives you a little more freedom to sometimes have the character's actions impact things in a way that if things are kind of set more in stone, it's harder to.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it has its drawbacks, obviously, because when someone's like, I want to go all the way to the top today, and I'm like, okay, well,
it's like 13th floor. Have you seen that?
Let me get my pencil out so I can take notes myself.
Yeah. At that list of names, the list of cities, and I'm like,
yeah. Have you seen 13th floor? It's basically like a sort of like the Matrix type movie.
Yeah.
And these people don't realize they're in a simulation until one of them figures it out, and he's like to tell one of the other guys, he's like, just go someplace you would never go before, as far as you can. And he's like, what does that even mean? And then like towards the end of the movie, he does it, and he just gets to an edge where there's just wireframe. He's like, oh my god.
I guess
you're saying that's what it's like when
yeah. Most people don't. Not very often does a group go, we're dropping everything here and we're going 100 miles away.
It doesn't make sense, and B, it's just the group trying to screw with the D.
Yeah. If they're doing that, they're screwing with you. They're like in the middle of something, and they're like, you know what? I think I'm done with this. I think I think let's go 100 miles across the sea and do something over there. I'm like, you bastards. Well, that's the end of this session. See you guys next week. Oh man.
But yeah, I've got I have broad, like a few of the broad strokes even set up for next campaign if we do one. And some of the stuff, I have lots of stuff between the other continent and some of the in-between stuff that is there, but there's just no reason
that might be a better thing to talk about. If we do a campaign, if you like looking at the future, we're in this campaign now. This isn't a follow-up of the last campaign, right? We're in a different world. Okay, well, anyways, let's say we move on.
We have a main character from the last campaign that's in this.
Yep.
Let's say, well, like he's like an interdimensional traveler or some shit. Let's say
this is in the past.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe he just lives forever. Let's say we go next campaign.
Mm-hmm.
How do you if you go continually, and here's another campaign, and here's another campaign, and here's another campaign, and years are passing in between these campaigns. Ostensibly, there's not a world threat every 5 years that like is going to destroy the entire world that heroes need to do. So you're a lot of times there's a time skip, right?
Yeah.
I find it harder and harder. Like Michael's campaign followed up, and we did all that crazy shit at the end of the first campaign, and we come back, and it's like something hit the reset button, and we're stuck in Fantasyland again. How many continuous campaigns? How do you think you would handle progression of technology? If they're at the technology level they're at right now in your campaign, another 100 years, things look wildly different, right? Things are definitely steampunk or post-industrial revolution world.
Mm-hmm.
Or magic is important, but not as important.
Yeah, I kind of thought about that. Like if you keep going and it keeps continuing and there's nothing, nothing devastating happens.
Yeah.
Then you could absolutely make it to where like, artificers become way more prominent.
Yes.
And through a lot of their work, we get all these different, especially in, where the in my world, especially where in the Glipnik Commonwealth where the gnomes are.
Yeah.
Like their stuff just becomes super steampunk.
I think that a series that I really liked that did this very well was Avatar: The Last Airbender. So in the original show, it's kind of there's one nation that has maybe some tech. They're just starting to touch that tech a little bit, but everything else is really traditional Chinese. They're doing martial arts, and the power of the show is like the main driver of political power and everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Show ends, they defeat the bad guy, which is one of the nations. The next show is after he dies. That's just how the system works. He dies, next Avatar, right? Well, by the time the new Avatar is old enough to go on an adventure, they've set up a city that is composed of all the greatest nations on Earth coming together, and there is technology and techniques that were really rare and really impossible. Like the fire guys could shoot lightning. Now they have like factory workers who all day they come in and they shoot lightning at generators to power the electricity of the city. And they have the people who aren't benders who don't have the power are like have a lot more political influence because technology is leveling the playing field between the haves and the have-nots as far as the powers go. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And it was a really cool transition. And every fantasy setting I've ever played in, like even follow-up campaigns, we're just hitting a reset button at some point. So we can keep in this like.
Yeah. So mainly so you can stay within the rules that are already given to you.
So you can stay within the fantasy rules.
Yeah. And I thought about that and I thought, well, you could have like part of the world like start to advance in technology, but you could also have another part of the world resistant to it and conservative. And,
but that
or dive deep into magics instead of mechanical stuff. Like we don't dirty ourselves with mechanical things. We're all about magic. Which is, I mean, I think it's cool because especially with like deeper role playing stuff. And if you have your player, especially anyone playing a wizard, if they like want to get deep into it and start making up spells, if they become prominent enough, then that could be like a common spell later in a future campaign, right? And it could, like Tosh's hideous laughter, it could be named after the person who made it, which I think would be cool.
How much agency do you think you would give a player if a player had an idea for a class or something that would affect how a aspect of the world worked? How open are you with all the planning that you did specifically? How open are you to like allowing some kind of change like that?
As far as the change to the world, I think it's fine. I would have to, I would, be in conversations with this person and talk about how is it going to integrate into the world? What changes do you think it's going to make versus what changes do I think it's going to make?
Yeah.
And then the big sort of compromise is going to come in, especially if it's a new class, is going to come in power level just for rules sake. But as far as if you're just making a class or something or a spell or something based on, and you're trying to talk about how it's going to integrate into the world, it's not going to be, especially if it's a new thing, it's going to start being you are the only or one of a few of this type of person. It's going to spread very slowly.
Yeah. When it's a completely new thing, right?
Yeah.
But, yeah, that'd be fine. I mean, to me, it's like, whatever. If someone says, I want this to work this way, is that okay? I think most of the time I'd say, yeah, that's fine. But like, I don't put as much planning in as you. So that's why I was interested to see. Like, if someone had something that fundamentally changed how something worked, that would be harder.
Yeah, I talk to, probably Brian is the one who comes to me the most with questions about if I want to do this, is that okay? I'm like, yeah, here's what's going to happen. Like, so here's what to expect. And then based on roles, whatever, these other things might happen. But yeah, I've worked with Brian a lot on different things like that. We basically made, it's not amazingly customized, but we did make a combination of his subclasses.
Yeah.
So,
and what about you, Joe? You got any questions?
Yeah, I got one more for you. Okay. How big of an impact are you willing to let players make on the world building, in the sense of like backstories, things like that? Because so, like, as an example, like David's character in I think it's Thursdays, he's been talking about, we can go to my people. We have a big empire. I'm pretty high up in it. I'll get them to help us.
As far as the impact that a player's backstory has on the overall world, if you don't talk to me about it, it's going to be minimal. Yeah. If you just come in a session and be like, oh, also, my empire of kobolds, I'm going to be like, wait a minute, you said nothing about this to me.
That was the thing for me. It was like, we started at level 1, so I'm thinking about that. I'm going, well, how can you be high up if you're level 1? Unless your country's just like a bunch of pushovers. like us 4 could walk in and take out 45.
Yeah, it's mainly if you how much back and forth are you going to do with me, or how much back and forth you're going to do with your DM.
Yeah.
Before the campaign starts, like Brian and I went back and forth a lot on his backstory, so I have a very good idea about what his backstory means to the world and vice versa.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to do that, if you just want to write me a paragraph and then later want to be like, oh, also, I'm super mega powerful, and we're like, no, you're not. You might think you are. That's fine.
Okay. I think here's a better example of this. You have a character that's integrated into the world really well.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I got together with you or any other DM, and I'm like, here's my character. Here's this crazy backstory. I want it to affect this part of the world, and I want it to be geopolitically active in this way. And my uncle was the king of Shropshire and all this stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
Whole thing, we go back and forth. It's ingrained in the world. In a sense, it's part of the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I die. And then I'm like, all right, what's my next character? Oh, my next character is going to be this. And I come up with another super duper intricate thing, and it affects this and it affects that. It's much harder to get it to work once the ball is rolling. Freedom constricts as the weight of the campaign builds upon itself. And it eventually becomes this thing where the scaffolding is so tall and so heavy that to like shoehorn something else in there major would upset the power structure of the world if it has been explored to that extent. How do you think you could handle that kind of? That's a good.
I'll tell you exactly how I would handle that. Okay, so you give me this big backstory, whatever you care, and it's sort of, the story is sort of moving in, like parts of the story are moving in that direction to deal with this thing that was in your backstory, but you die, and the rest of the party is like, we don't even want to deal with that. That was his thing. We're like, okay, that's fine. Whatever it was, that's still going to be going on in the background. So that may first off that may have some consequences later on for like territorial or political things going on. You come in with this new character that is also super integrated. That will take way more back and forth because a lot of the things are already set.
Yeah.
But I would try my best to still integrate it. Instead of you being like, I'm the son of this noble, and you give me a name, like some random name. I'm like, how about you're this guy's relative that I already have written down somewhere.
Okay.
And you're like, okay. So it's just trying to work with the player to get what they want out of it. I would try.
How much of the magic system do you think you have in place? How flexible is that?
What do you mean? Through the Aegis?
Yeah, like you have a magic system set out in your mind, right? How casters work in your world.
Yeah.
If someone comes and says, "Well, I'd like my magic to work this way," is that the same? That's the same scenario, I suppose.
I mean, really, it's pretty broad, right? It's either
bend it to fit.
You learned it through books, you were granted it through like your bloodline, or you were granted it from a patron. Those are really the three ways that magic works.
God gave me my power.
Yeah. So if as long as you're one of those, I mean, if there's not, I can't really think of another way that you would get it outside of those three. I mean,
what about adding a god? Oh my god, is
the Pantheon I left very open because I like, if you guys want to throw things at me, I mean, I'm still filling it in. Like, if I'm just bored one day, I'll sit down and think about the Pantheon because I have an idea of how it works.
Yeah.
A broad stroke, but I haven't filled it all in yet. And if you wanted to add a god, again, that would be a thing that we could talk about. But because I haven't listed out all the gods and because I haven't listed out everything about the world, then we can be like, okay, this fits here. We'll put it there.
It would be easier to do that. Like if Joe made another warlock or a cleric and he wanted to have, the god of ping pong be his patron.
It's a very specific god.
Super good at ping pong.
Dude, I want to be ping pong champion, dude.
I want to become the next god of ping pong.
Yeah. His weapon is a ping pong, and he imbues the balls with magic power that make them super hard after he hits them. He throws it up and he wicked serves, and it just does a D12 of damage. Yeah,
curves
bow, and it hits them. Does like a little. Dang,
like
that one had a lot of backspin.
With a ping pong battle.
Yes, yeah.
Curving it around corners, hitting people,
knocking them in the head.
Yeah, but if someone wanted to, like, let's say I did have all the Pantheon laid out and someone wanted to add a god, I think I would probably just be like, either A, this is a new god that like nobody knows and it's going to be a thing. Like the more and more that people find out about this, the more it's slowly going to change how people work about it. Or how about you just take this one that we haven't really talked much about?
It's going to go one of two ways. It's either a brand new god or a really old one that no one knows about.
It's either a brand new god or just, and it doesn't even have to be one that nobody knows about, but just because, like, I keep I don't tell my players everything that I have in my brain.
Yeah.
Because if they come up with something that I'm like, oh, well, that fits with almost everything except for this thing that I was thinking of bringing up, but I haven't brought it up yet, so it's not set in stone. I can change that, and then we can just move on. So that's why I try not to tell. I try not to show all my cards because I can change them if I need to. If I don't show them all.
Have you thought about like ancient past of your world at all? Like how does the history of the world affect the now?
Somewhat. But I stopped
that's
the major
getting more
events.
into it.
Yeah, I thought about it a little bit, like, and you've seen a little bit of it, actually, because you sat down in that chair. And Wild.
Yeah, I remember that chair.
So you know a little bit about it, but the most of the stuff that I did was stopped with Cogrid Blackthane. And the events that sort of led to the unification of Northern Orteith. But before that, there are some things like you saw in the chair, but outside of that, there's not a lot.
I guess it wouldn't, like, depending on the campaign, it could not matter at all.
Yeah, that's why I try not. I mean, I get into it sometimes. I get into the weeds, and I'm like, this is never going to come up. I should stop doing this.
No, that's when you dig even deeper.
Well, because it's funny because like I'll start doing that, and then something else weird that I would never have thought of comes up, and I'm like, well, I guess I'll make something up for that.
Well, yeah. D&D world building is weird. It definitely has to be more flexible for sure.
Yeah, it definitely has. It's not because if you're writing a book, you can be like everything is this way, and if it becomes a problem, I'm the guy to go back to fix it, and I made it, so it's easy. But in D&D world building, it's like, oh, the players did a thing that if I stick to this thing that was in my brain, it just breaks the world. So we're gonna change that, and they'll never know.
Yeah, I feel like fantasy. I've only ever done fantasy. I feel like a sci-fi world would be much harder to set up.
I mean,
much harder to control. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because the more you bring actual physics into it, it gets harder, especially because in the present, we don't know everything about physics. So like 2 months, some new discovery happens and we're like, well, we've been playing this game and the way we've been doing it, that couldn't work.
Well, it's even just like the vastness of a sci-fi universe, right? Like if you were going to do, say, Super Future, Star Trek,
yeah,
and you set up this whole system, right? The players go, I'm going to travel 100 light years out of the way. And it's like, well, me sideways. That's a completely different. They could be doing things completely different over there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like in Fantasyland, you're stuck on the planet. There's extra dimensional stuff sometimes, but really that's just another flavor of ice cream for, you know what I mean? It's like, you're in the vanilla world and this is the chocolate chip world. But
yeah. Like we went out so far that now we're not in ice cream, we're in Jello now. So
yeah, we're in the Jello land. Everyone here is a blob and nobody likes you, and it's like this is the world of gelatinous cubes.
Yeah, I mean making a sci-fi world would be it always gets, no matter what you're doing, whether you're doing fantasy or sci-fi, it always gets mucked up and I try to give players agency to do this kind of thing, but it gets mucked up when you're like, well, this is how it would work in real life. Yeah, but
this isn't real
there's not magic in real life. There's no warp engines in real life. So,
oh, well, yeah. I mean, you gotta I like to throw in the physics stuff myself, but in a world of magic, it's just a total bullshit out the wall. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Could I crush someone with a block of ice?
You have the freedom to do extra.
Yeah. You can do that extra stuff.
I try to. It just gets tough, especially. I don't want to make anything be like, oh, to make it so streamlined that like every fight you're doing the exact same move. I'm like, well, okay, you win again. Yeah. Good job.
Good job. Yeah. So, what do you think are some both of you? What do you think are some really good examples of like a unique world building aspect from like media that you've consumed? What is something like really unique that you think felt like it stood out as a really cool mechanic of the world that they're in?
I mean, Harry Potter. The first Harry Potter I watched, I was like, this is amazing because I love the world building of it.
Yeah.
And then as I kept watching more and more Harry Potter movies, I was like, this is less about world building now and just watching Harry be sad.
Harry Potter has, to go back to what we were talking about a little earlier, like used Avatar as like a different generational thing. Technology gets better.
Yeah.
If you look at Harry Potter, it's kind of the opposite. They don't. I mean, they get modern looking clothes, but they're not.
No one's. Yeah, you never see
a flying car, but like everyone's still using like brooms. Everyone still dresses. Like a lot of the old professors and stuff still dress the same way.
It's ostensibly like the modern world, but wizards are separated, but wizards are still living in the 1800s. Yeah, for sure. And there's like nobody at Hogwarts has an iPhone. Okay, yeah, sure. They magically turned them all off. No one managed to sneak in an iPod Touch and like listen to music. Nobody is like, oh, come on down, dude. We're gonna hit up the cello, bro. Like nobody's into modern culture at all. It is a weird thing about Harry Potter. Also, I don't want to get too deep into Harry Potter. Harry Potter starts out with like a basic premise. It is another world where magic exists in parallel with the regular world. Mm-hmm. And then as they build on it, it's like second movie, this is still solid. Third book, third movie, you're like, all still pretty much make sense. And then after that, it's like, oh, that was that significant. my favorite example from that series is the Cloak of Invisibility.
Yeah.
Which is like, here's the Cloak of Invisibility, and you're like, damn, that's sick, Cloak of Invisibility. And then with the hindsight of seeing them all and reading the books, you're like, that's not just a rare object. It is one of the rarest objects in existence.
There's one.
Like, just one. Ron undersold that thing like wicked. He's like, whoa, I've heard those are rare. Not, holy fucking shit. That's like a fairy tale object.
I didn't even think that was real.
I didn't
That's
even
like
think
the
that was
Holy
real,
Grail.
bro.
What are you doing with that?
Yeah, and Dumbledore's just like, hand it over, boss.
Yeah, buddy, you can have this.
You can have this one of a kind item that can never be reproduced.
And that's another thing about those movies. Dumbledore had all three of them at one point.
Yeah, he did.
Making him the master of death. He can't go take out those dudes. He's invisible. He can't die, and his wand's better than everyone else's.
Dude, that movie, the story building in that really fell apart towards the end, for sure.
Yeah. And
it seemed planned, but that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
It's because, and I think this can happen with anything. You start out with a solid idea, and then it takes off in a way that you're not expecting, and you're like, I gotta extend this out a little bit, boys. Yeah, for sure. I think another
Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek.
Yeah,
there was like, because they, especially from the original series in TNG, they had all these other writers, but from what I've heard, Gene Roddenberry would butt heads with a lot of that stuff that they would write because he had the world built in his head.
Yeah.
And these writers that had no idea about Star Trek, they were just good writers, would come in and give you a story and be like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, in the world context of the world.
Yeah, he would be like down to the little things, like the difference between deflectors and shields, which in the new Star Trek, they just say deflector shields, which I'm sure Gene would have hated.
Okay. That's the kind of stuff I feel like almost you either need to be super clear about it from the beginning and never waver, or if it is going to change, I think that simplification of deflector shields instead of deflectors and shields, that's quality of life change right there. That's like, let's chill out a little bit on the difference here. They're basically the same thing.
Well, like Gene,
they were
different because deflectors was just the thing that the dish would put out to keep your ship from warping into space dust. It would just be like literally a deflector, like a windshield.
Oh yeah,
shields
set of
were what you put up to put whenever you were going to fight, right?
Oh, okay. Well, now it's just a combo unit, dude. It's in the future.
Yeah,
they've combined those into one thing.
It is what it is. But anyway, that as far as world building goes, that was one of the things that I was like, oh, Gene Roddenberry actually had all this mapped out. But
some people do.
The more people you bring onto a project, the harder it is to keep it.
That's like that's like the Tolkien approach, right? Where everything is planned, where everything has a backstory and everything. There's like languages. The amount of prep and work he did, that's like a level of detail that's not possible in D&D, because if you do that, your players have no agency in the world.
Yeah.
But to get back to my question, another example I have of a like a cool mechanical thing that happens in a story that I think really kind of sets that world up is Joe's going to know about this. Arcane, the League of Legends show on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
The crux of that show is that it's not future society, but it is like, it's kind of in a weird place. Steampunk plus, right?
Okay.
And the main advancement of technology in the show that really pushes the story forward is there is magic in the world, but magic is dangerous. Arcane stuff is, the people who can do it are like crazy powerful, but they're really few and far between. And there's a character in the show who sees it, and the guy saves his life and like does all these crazy things. And he's like, I got to figure this out. And he goes down the technology route. He's super smart, and they keep telling him you can't mess with magic. And the big change is he figures out how to create objects that can contain magical ability, and then he can harness the arcane power of the world to enhance different technologies. You know what I mean?
He's an artificer.
So it's like, he's an artificer, but in a sense that like mages aren't common at all. People who have power are way few and far. Like nobody ever sees these people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a big, huge development that gets the thing rolling. That gets the world rolling, if not the story directly sometimes, because he's kind of a tertiary character.
Mm-hmm.
The main story is obviously about characters because that's what makes an interesting show. But as far as the world building of the show, this is a thing that sets up a ton of stuff.
The main plot points.
It could definitely set up the next thing that comes, because the main character becomes her character from the game slowly over the course of the show. Like in the beginning, she's just someone who punches people. By the end, she gets her big magic gauntlets that are in the game. And that is because of his advancement of technology. I enjoy that kind of stuff quite a bit. Where like some huge development like that can kickstart a story in an interesting way. I don't know. I'm in this place where I love D&D. I love magic. Magic's fucking sick as hell. Boom, magic. But it feels kind of stale sometimes, and I'd like a break from the D&D mold. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that'd be nice.
I would really like it if players in the campaign are wanting to change things to just come and talk to me. Like I think those are the most interesting things. You're like, I got this idea that I think my character would do. And it would go like this, and I'm like, oh, okay, and then we'd go back and forth on it, and I think those things can make really interesting stories.
Yeah, change how. Change fundamentally how something in D&D might work to make a more interesting world to be in.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, rarely am I going to go, yes, we'll do it exactly what you said. It usually gets a compromise, and it goes back and forth over multiple iterations to sort of make it fit, but not make all the stuff we've done in the campaign worthless.
Somewhere in between the full collaborative effort we did on Thursday's campaign and a fully DM controlled world on the other end of the spectrum.
My ideal is to have your like DM build the world, and then as your players interact with it, see the ways that they can make that their characters can make changes that might affect it.
Yeah,
is my ideal, like what I want to happen when I play D&D.
It's nice. It's been a lot nicer lately, where actions feel like they affect the world more, and that's been the biggest change in the last like 4 years of me playing. Whereas way before, since I'm just dungeon delving, the world building doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about it more now because I'm having more character ideas that might affect how a world works. So it's like I put those on the back burner and wait for a campaign to start over. You know what I mean? Because that churning of the world allows for a break from the tradition.
Yeah. And like when you have character ideas, especially if they're sort of more powerful, I think it's a cool idea to, while you're low level, just let your DM know where you want to take it. And your DM can give you can spoon feed you the little bits that help to get you there. And it makes it very fun. Like it doesn't always have to be, everything doesn't have to be a surprise, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a collaborative storytelling.
Absolutely.
So like you can be like, this is where I want to end up. And I can be like, okay, I can help you get there. And then we sort of figure it out as we go. And it makes for, I think, a fun experience.
See, this is why we need this show, because I want to do that now. And I hadn't ever thought about that.
I was thinking like, there's no way Joe hasn't come up with some crazy ass character idea that doesn't really work within the confines of how D&D is structured. But if you got in early, or if you're able to explain it in a way that makes it make sense with the story, you could have a crazy, unique character and backstory that fits within the rules, but bends the definition of something that's in traditional D&D in an interesting way.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I don't know for sure, but that's from what I can tell. When they do Critical Role, like different players will give Matt different things.
Yeah,
and I think Taliesin just gives him this is all my character knows. Have at it. But I think there are other players who give him basically everything. Like this is what I am. This is what I'm headed towards. This is exactly how I want my story to play out. And Matt's like, okay.
I think that's definitely how Liam does it, especially with Vags.
Yeah, I think I don't know for sure, but I think Ashley gives him quite a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, and either one of those is fine, I think. It's and I still, like, as a DM, want to give a player some surprises. Even if they give me a whole, like, a roadmap for how they want it to play, I still want to give them some surprises, but to maybe they didn't expect to get to this point through this avenue or something like that. But I mean, I think getting there is
I'm coming around to it
the
more and
players
more.
can have a bigger say if they want to.
I'm coming around to it more and more, where, like, if I was more clear up front about how I wanted it to go, it would be a more interesting thing story-wise. I don't want to plan everything, obviously, because then it's like I know what's coming. I'm just waiting for this thing to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But having more set out in the beginning and having a like even the backstory I gave you for your campaign,
Mm-hmm.
I should have given you more detail about how I wished it would have played out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because what happened was fine, but it was not what was in my head at all. And if we could have met in the middle, it probably would have been more satisfying. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
in future, like, that's just an experience that I have to have, right? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
I've played D&D forever, but the story part of it is really recent.
I was going to say, only recently have you gotten into
Yeah, story stuff. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely been like, let's kill some monsters, boys. I'm here to kill monsters.
And like, speaking of your backstory and world building, yeah, your backstory informed a lot of the mountainous region up there. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, then this is going to fit into here.
Yeah. And I wanted it to play out maybe a little more like take a lot more time and be a little more geopolitical and things like that. But that's my fault. That's not your fault. That's me. I should have been more clear about how I expected that story to play out. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And obviously I have to be open to things changing, but I should have been more clear about not just like, I should have been, here's my backstory. And then I should have had like hey, let's talk about how I actually expect this to happen.
Yeah,
And then
and
you can play off of that.
that's something that I think a lot of players don't realize, and maybe a lot of DMs don't want. But I am 100% open to that.
That has to make every story a little bit better. It's great to listen, as a guy who can wing it all day, every day. I think like, as a player, it would be nice if I'm not giving you a super rigid structure. I'm giving the framework that builds towards what I want, but what can be built in any order.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what it's.
Yeah.
I know it would feel nice to be the only person who kind of knows what's going on and looking around going, yeah, my backstory's cool.
This is my
and everybody's enjoying it. That
Yes.
would really enhance the
more
Yes,
detail.
absolutely.
Yeah, it can. And not just like detail, but like that framework I'm talking about, that allows it to be more expansive instead of something that can be, let's go take care of your family real quick, and it's done in a session or two. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But something that plays out for the duration of the campaign, almost, where you're chipping away at it the whole time, instead of being like, let's go knock out Jimbo's backstory. Now let's go knock out Bob's backstory.
And that is, I mean, that's a good idea. It is harder to pull off, especially without the player actively participating.
Sure, absolutely. and if it's just like here's my backstory, do whatever you want, that can end in any way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in my own head, I've talked myself into, I need to advocate more for a story structure that includes the backstory that I want it to be, instead of just hoping that story structure makes it through to the campaign in the way that I expect it to.
Yeah, even to the degree that, I mean, I have no problem with players being like, here's my backstory, and here's, say, 2-3 story beats that I want to happen before it's resolved. I'm like, okay, great. That makes it easier on the DM.
And that's what I'm saying. That's the structure. It's like, okay, here's my backstory. You read it. After you've read it, I go, okay, so you've read my backstory? Sick. All right. I would like these story beats to play out, and the ending. Obviously, I need to leave leeway at every intersection, but those intersections, I would like these intersections to happen so that it can happen across an expanse of time instead of like, and boom, we're done.
Yeah,
and boom, this thing's done, and then the whole thing's over.
Yeah, and we're all still learning about how to make this better for all of us. And like for your backstory, I did not anticipate you guys going there as early as you did. And,
yeah.
And Grondar was much tougher than he seemed to be.
I'm not complaining about how it turned out, right? Like it turned out the way it turned out, and I'm totally fine with that. In my head, it was a thing that was going to take me the length of the campaign to accomplish.
Yeah.
But I should have been more clear about that. And in hindsight, I should have been more clear about that. But now I know that. So next time I can be like, all right, boss, here's my thing. And while the details are for you to decide, I would like it to this happens, this happens, this happens, or I would like for this to take a long time, or this needs to be like a thing where I'm personally doing this thing. Me and my band of merry fellows are personally reuniting these tribes. I should have been more clear about that in the onset, but that's good. That's hindsight story building lessons.
And that's like, especially because we have more players than like an average group. It can be like, because I think that the sort of the holdback from people, I don't think the reason people don't think about doing this kind of thing is because it's supposed to be a game where everyone is discovering everything always. But especially when you have more players, if the DM and one player know what's going on in a certain part of the story, and we still have 4 or 5 other players that are completely in the dark, that's just like basically one of the players becomes a co-DM for a certain arc, and then they give it up and they get to explore the other people.
But it's like nice vignettes, right?
Yeah.
All right, Bob, we're going to take care of the first section of your backstory. And in that moment, yes, it is. This guy is the main character, and everyone else is just along for the ride. And then maybe you go back to the main story for a little while, and then you branch off and you go do his backstory for a little while. And for that section, it's not a group. It is a group effort, and the group makes decisions. But that guy is really the main character of what's happening right now. And it's the ability of the other players to take a step back and say, like, let this guy have his moment here for a second, right?
Yeah, which I don't feel like is ever been a problem in groups.
But like even in our group, it might be bigger than average, but it's all like how many people are putting this much thought and detail into it.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by one of the advantages to having a bigger group is because if you have a DM and 2 players, and each player has this detailed backstory and they know what's going on, then it becomes a little less fun for the table, I feel like, because there's only ever one person that's completely unexpecting everything, right, at a time. But when you have 4 to 5 people that don't know all the details, I think it becomes more fun because there's sort of enthusiasm comes from that, as opposed to having basically I think it's more fun to have a higher ratio of players than 2 DMs.
I don't. You know what? You just said that 2-person campaign, 2 people in a DM, 3 people total. I think that could work exactly the same because it's an exploration. These characters, they meet each other. If they don't know each other before the campaign starts, they meet each other at the beginning of the campaign. Over time, they're doing odd jobs at the beginning, level 0, level 1 kind of shit. You know what I mean? You move on and they become closer friends, and then their backstory comes up, and it's like, well, you need to tackle this, bro. And then they're buddies and they go on this adventure. And the secondary player who's not their backstory, they're invested in this person's backstory. And a 3-person campaign could be fucking sick as hell, dude, because
it can absolutely work.
Yeah, you could.
I'm not saying they can't. I just think that it's better for whenever you give players enough agency to basically write part of the overall story.
Yeah.
I think it's more interesting when you have more players because that's more variables that can change things, right?
Yeah.
And the changing of things, I think, is one of the most fun parts. Like you guys getting that boat, I'm having a good time with it. But at no point did I expect you guys to be able to keep that boat. But the dice had other thoughts, and that's what happened.
And now we
Like,
can
there
work
was-
in.
Yeah, there was
Now we
never a
can work
point where
in-
I was like, they're gonna have a boat. I was like,
We
I'm
have
gonna get
this
rid of that boat.
Yeah, we have this boat. I get something I want of it. Start a business. Other people who wanted the boat, they're getting the boat out of it. Sick. We have a boat. Joe came in with, let's loop the geopolitical situation of your backstory into it. That's fucking sick. now that funnels into it, right? And it's a collaborative storytelling effort in that moment, even though it took up an entire session.
Yeah,
There's nothing
great.
wrong with that. Yeah.
Absolutely. If everyone's having a good time, then it's fine.
Some-
Everyone's having a good time.
sometimes-
That's the point.
Sometimes it's not your day, and you just have to sit there and you just have to go. That's some interesting stuff going on. Wow.
Yeah,
Yep.
I feel like that's partially personalities too, though. I mean, even when other people are trying to do stuff, I am constantly sitting there going, "Would my character involve himself in this right now?" And if yes,
that's
then
the-
I'll step up and be like, "What about?" And if not, I'll be like, "No, he would just watch."
That's like the stepping back. Yeah. In your head, you're going, I'm not involved in this, and I don't think my character would be involved in this. I'm just gonna like stand here and I'm gonna let them do their thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Might chime in if asked.
yeah, and I sit back and I like, especially like with last night's Saren's talking to his sister. I was sitting there going, what would Arrow be doing right now? And I'm like, he would just be sort of taking notes on this and then probably come up to Saren later and ask if everything's okay.
Yeah, you're not
So I have,
You're not gonna
like, I
break
don't
up the
wanna-
intimate moment.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be like, hey, how's everything going over here? But I'll be like, okay, I hear
Slap
all
them both on
this.
the shoulders and go, group hug, guys.
But
What
I
an
can sit
effort
there
it
and be like, I
was.
hear all this, and then later on, if we're taking a watch together or something, I can bring these things up and we can sort of talk about them because my character would be interested, but my character's also not going to be like, hey, I would like to be the center of attention right now.
Yeah. Well,
But anyway,
anyways, I think we're at the end of this episode. You know what? Should we? No. I'll save it for after. We'll talk about what the next topic's going to be afterwards. I think the next
Okay.
topic. I think I got an idea for the next topic.
okay. Well,
We'll have a whole week to prepare.
that's been world building. What?
That was
before
a
we
general
leave-
episode.
Yeah, before we leave, where would you first one or two steps if you were to build a world? Where would you start?
I personally would start with maps and cities, and then I like to dig really deeply into how magic systems work, and I want to make the magic system feel good because I like to play casters, and the magic system has such a huge impact on a world that you can get a lot of mileage out of like tweaking all the little things, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the magic system is also a place where players can have a lot of freedom and agency to change how I would structure that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So your idea was the governing body that controls magic for the most part within this region of the world, right? That's an interesting way to do it. But I'm talking even like, how do warlocks actually work? How do wizards actually work? Do I want to change the vernacular of how spell books work? Do I want to like tweak it in a way that makes it new and refreshing, but still have the framework of the original? That's the kind of things I'm especially interested in right now.
Okay. What about you, Joe?
I think my first couple of steps is like I want to establish my countries, my continents, and inform players of anywhere they can be from and get their backstories in before I start really delving into the world. I'll have an idea of certain things, of course, but I want to get their input on what they want their character to be, their life to be like, so I can fit my story around them.
That's a good one. Because someone that allows a lot more, like what we were talking about. I want to be from here and I want it to be like this. And then you can be like, I can work that in because I haven't said that's not set in stone.
Yeah, I try to do that, but some people don't give me backstories until like the week before we play. So
I think I get.
There's only so
I think I
much you
did.
can do.
I think I did give you that backstory way more than a week before we played.
Yeah, maybe I wasn't talking about you.
Oh. Then that only leaves 3 people. But anyways, it doesn't matter. This has been kind of world building. It's been world building.
That was a lot of world building.
It was a lot of world building. We talked about DMing. We talked about world building. We talked about characters and campaign and intentions. I think it was an overall solid episode. So hopefully we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
Fuck out of here, Craig.